It is 7 o'clock straight up on October 22nd, so I'm calling the meeting to order. First order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. George, would you lead us, please? Thank you very much. May I have roll call, please?
Dr. Skidmore,
Here.
Mrs. Matura,
Here.
Mrs. Greenberg, Mrs. Case,
Here.
Mrs. Bacon.
Here.
Next on the agenda is approval of agenda, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Welsh.
Thank you, President Greenberg. Items approved by consent will not come up for discussion during the meeting, but will be approved when the agenda is adopted. This is possible since members of the governing board receive the agenda along with backup materials at least 24 hours prior to the meeting and have time to review and consider all items. Prior to the agenda being adopted, members of the governing board or audience may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and brought to the floor for discussion at the appropriate place on the agenda. I would like to offer the agenda as posted.
Thank you very much. Does any member of the board wish to move anything, change anything on the agenda? Does any member of the audience, I will put on my glasses for this, does any member of the audience wish to change anything on the agenda? Seeing none, Mrs. Case, may I have a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is governing board statements. Mrs. Case, do you have anything? Okay, I will switch to Mrs. Bacon.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Matura? Nope. Dr. Skidmore?
Thank you, President Greenberg. I fully realize the agenda includes a discussion on reopening, but I don't want my statement to get lost in the rhetoric. As my colleagues, I have received a number of emails from our faculty about in-person and online learning simultaneously. Additionally, a far greater number of teachers have called or emailed my home account. At this time, I have not received one rave review about teaching in dual modalities. I believe our staff, principals, and central office personnel are working diligently toward viable solutions, but it's not working. Paradise is better than this. It's stalled by equipment deliveries, internet problems, and a myriad of other issues. We must find a way to overcome these hurdles. We must lessen the classroom teacher's burden of trying to teach kids both at home and in the classroom at the same time. Our dedicated teachers feel guilty. They express they cannot do their best. Their students' education is suffering and they stress. They get hives. Their significant others tell them to resign. And they look in the mirror each morning and say, I can't do both. I'd gladly do one or the other, but not both. Sadly, I think they think no one is listening. Be assured I am. Which serves as a segue into my humble suggestion. Please, Dr. Welsh, assemble our best and brightest parents, teachers, and administrators, not simply just Slack. Communicate with forward thinkers across the country who have developed successful online strategies. If it was within my authority, I would begin with the foremost educational visionary in Arizona, ASU President Dr. Michael Crow, whose College of Education has already developed a number of such strategies. Now, my idea of this think tank cannot wait another moment. We must find solutions soon, for according to a survey I received last week, over 90 teachers are going to leave our district when the semester ends in December. This is not 1970, when trained, unemployed teachers were in abundance. Assuredly, my days at the dais are numbered, and all of you are well within your right to disregard my statement. But I urge you to act sooner rather than later. 3 months or 6 months from now, Monday morning quarterbacking is moot. Our students and staff need help now, not next semester. Thank you.
Mrs. Case?
I apologize. I got lost on my phone. Okay. I have a text to read from a friend who's a teacher in the district, and her words speak much better than my words. And so I want to read what she said. I wanted to reach out as an experienced teacher to let the board know that teaching both in person and online is not sustainable. I teach second grade and have 26 kids. I'm responsible for teaching many subjects. Having 19 kids in my classroom, social distance, wearing masks, and 8 kids online and unmuting, asking what we're doing, showing up late, not paying attention, and constantly interrupting the kids in person is wearing on me. The stress I feel daily is insurmountable. I was joking with my teammates this week that I wanted to start taking a Valium before school started, just so that my blood pressure and heart rate wouldn't be raised so high by the time we go to lunch. Managing all of these kids' needs is impossible at best. I feel like I am doing a disservice to both groups of kids despite my best efforts. I am planning copying, printing, and putting packets out weekly for the online kids to come pick up from school. Half of the time, they do not come and pick them up, so they do not have what they need with the rest of the class. The kids in my class are getting a more frazzled me because of the demands being put on us. If I just had to worry about kids wearing masks socially, distancing, and learning in person, I feel like I could manage things much better. All of it combined is wearing teachers out. At the end of each day, I feel as if I have not been an effective teacher for either the kids online or the kids in person, because I cannot physically, mentally, and emotionally meet all the needs represented in these two groups. I am hopeful that there can be another solution in the near future, as this seems an impossibility to continue for the entire year. The kids have so many academic gaps, and trying to fill those gaps to the best of my ability leaves me feeling defeated that I am not meeting the needs of these two groups of kids. And I have read dozens of letters from teachers, and I'll discuss more of my opinion when we get to that on the agenda. Sometimes people don't stay for a whole board meeting, and I wanted to get this voice out at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Case. I just have a couple things. Obviously, we will be discussing reopening later, and I think we all have further comments with that. I would just like to thank our partners in the quick building of Elementary School 33. We had our not quite groundbreaking because ground has been broken, but our beam signing and small ceremony on Monday, and it was just a lovely, intimate affair, shall we say. But it was great to see where the school is and how it's going up. So I want to thank all our partners for that. We also were able to have a virtual student voice gathering last week, and it was terrific to regroup with these high school students, meet our new freshmen, and hear their experiences. Some are staying online, some have gone back to school, some were still waiting their opportunity to return. And it was just great to hear their perspective, get a real grasp of how they are doing, how they've been doing. Um, I think one of the things I think we all were very pleased to hear is that for those who have returned, they feel that they and the other students are truly taking to heart the needs of mask wearing and hand washing and one-way hallways and everything that we've tried to do in terms of the safety protocols at our school, and they're really holding to that. I'm sure not every single student, every moment, but the vast majority in their experience are, and I think we all very much appreciated hearing that. So it was fun to be able to, although virtually, get back with the kids at Student Voice. So just wanted to give a shout out to them and to all of our high school principals for keeping that going, and Mr. Long, obviously, and Dr. Walsh. Next on the agenda, we have awards and recognitions, but we have none this evening. Call to the public. I do have one card, and that would be Beth Bessendorfer. As you're coming, I just want to remind you, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Governing Board and Dr. Welsh. My name is Beth Bessendorfer and I teach middle school math. My reason for speaking here tonight is to try to paint a picture of what teaching has been like since returning to the classroom. I have been thinking about this speech for a few days now and have lost sleep over it. I've had great difficulty trying to decide what to include in such a short amount of time. In the end, I made the decision to give you a snapshot of just one of my classes. My kids come in and they are instructed not to touch any desk except for their own. Anyone who touches a desk other than theirs must clean that desk to keep it germ-free. Next is the beginning of class, at which time I join my Google Meet to bring in my PV Connect students. During attendance, I go through all of my in-person students first, and then through all of my PV Connect students second. Those who I mark absent in person but show up in PV Connect that day need to be labeled accordingly. So I leave that screen and go into another screen and mark those students with their current location. While in that screen, I next check to see if I have any newly added students that are isolated or quarantined, and if so, I make a note of when they are allowed back on campus. And when a student shows up that is on the isolation or quarantine list, that requires an immediate email to the nurse to inquire about the situation. Class finally begins and we are reviewing for a quiz tomorrow. Everything I've written on the board needs also to be typed in the chat for our PV Connect students. At the same time that I'm teaching my in-person students, I'm monitoring my Google Meet chat to see if students at home have questions on the quiz material. While my students complete an in-class review that I've created online, I'm helping students in person while trying to help my PV Connect students simultaneously. While providing instruction to both groups of kids who are struggling with the content, I'm continually stopping to fill out a restroom form every time a student needs to leave. This is to make sure kids are staying distance while in the halls and restroom. Soon there's just 5 minutes left in class, at which time a student will start counting out paper towels. I then walk through each row and spray every student's desk so that each of them can scrub their desk for the next class coming in. Once that happens, the cycle starts all over again for the next period. I walk into my classroom every day with an enormous sense of responsibility, a responsibility to keep all of my students safe from COVID while keeping myself safe as well. This on top of the impractical situation of trying to teach students at home and in person at the same time and doing it well. I'm doing my best. I am working nights and I'm working weekends. I'm giving everything I have in an attempt to give my students the best experience I can. However, this is an impossible task. I'm watching teachers all around me crumble from the pressure that has unnecessarily been placed upon us. This is not working, and this level of commitment is just not sustainable. Teaching virtually may not have been an ideal situation, but neither is this. And at least when we were home, we were all safe. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one other card that is for an agenda item later. So next on the agenda is superintendent's comments, but before I throw it over to Dr. Welsh, he is celebrating a birthday on Monday, so I would like everybody to join us with a happy birthday. And I'm going to let Mr. Long start it because you're the musician here. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Welsh. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Mr. Long, and over to you.
Thank you. I was certainly not expecting that. I appreciate that. And I don't know, but I think this year counts for extra years. I'm not sure. All right. I do have some updates, obviously related to reopening, and I think much in line with some of the comments that we've heard this evening. But obviously, that's a little later on the agenda. The few of the things I wanted to share this evening. Some actual nice positive things that are going on. One being Shadow Mountains High School's North Valley Arts Academy's Music Technology Program is the recipient of the prestigious Grammy Museum Signature School Award. The program will receive $5,500, and students will be participating in multiple virtual career day sessions with major artists in the music industry. The Grammy Museum Signature School Program provides grants to public school music programs that demonstrate a need and a compelling plan to address that need. I'd also like to remind everybody this week is National School Bus Safety Week, and the theme is Red Lights Mean Stop, and draws attention to the importance of stopping when drivers see a school bus stopped with the red lights on and that stop arm extended. That signals that students are either boarding or exiting the bus, and drivers must stop. I want to thank all of our bus drivers in the transportation department, a few of those who are here this evening, for their continued support through the pandemic and with reopening of schools. Again, that team has been instrumental in helping just throughout so many of the situations we've been working through. Just a reminder to our families, K-8 parent-teacher conferences are scheduled for next week, October 26th through the 29th. And this year, as we've discussed a few times up here on the dais, schools will be offering a variety of ways for parents to connect with teachers, whether it's virtual, in person, or by phone. And obviously, those parent-teacher conferences bridge that connection between home and school, and it's a valuable opportunity, particularly in a year such as this, for parents to support their child's academic development. And last but most certainly not least, with the return to the boardroom for our meetings, we wanted to take this opportunity to do an in-person introduction of some of our new administrators who have been appointed over the last several months, but we have not had the opportunity to introduce. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Bales to share those brief introductions.
Thank you, President Greenberg, Governing Board, Dr. Welsh, Cabinet, and guests. Tonight we present the masked administrators. Although we won't ask them to take off their mask or sing, we will ask them to stand and be recognized live and in person. Assisting the North Canyon Rattlers as assistant principal, please welcome Matt Lurch. Immersing herself as principal at Sandpiper, Jessie Alcazar. Wrangling the herd as principal at Fireside, Dr. Danielle Elf. This eagle flew in from Colorado and landed as principal at Pinnacle Peak Prep, Dr. Aaron Freed. Waving the red, white, and blue as interim principal at Liberty, Jennifer Penoyer. Finally, our central office administrators. This digital whiz is coordinating PV Online, Dr. Patrice De La Osa. Cruising to the top of transportation as director, Brandon George. In the sidecar, our assistant director, Tony Izzo. And last but not least, our director for the certified, not the certifiable, Dr. Sean Holmes. And that, President Greenberg, are our newest and masked administrators for tonight.
Thank you. That concludes my comments for this evening as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Welsh and Dr. Bales. That was excellent. First on the agenda for items for approval is consideration approval of nomination for the Arizona School Boards Association Honor Roll Award, and I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Bacon.
I would like to make a motion that we approve Dr. Sue Skidmore as a nominee for the Arizona Honor Roll Award. She has served the district with distinction and comedy and intelligence and determination for many years. And we are grateful for what she's done for the district, for this board, and we would like to have her recognized by the Arizona School Boards Association. So I would recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bacon. Is there any discussion?
No, I made the motion.
She made a motion. We're cool. So if no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Motion passes not unanimously because we had an abstention, but congratulations, and we will get that nomination in. Next on the agenda is ratification of annual financial report for fiscal year 2020, and I will turn that over to Mrs. Felton.
Good evening, President Greenberg, Governing Board, Dr. Welsh. This is presentation, a brief summary of the 2019-2020 annual financial report that you're being asked to ratify this evening. In fiscal year 2019-20, the district had total revenues of about $364 million, bond proceeds of about 57.5, and expenditures from all funds of almost $378 million. This is almost $12 million less in expenditures than last year, and is the result in expenditures that didn't occur based on school being closed for the final quarter. Those, by the way, did take place mostly in food service, student activities, and auxiliary operations. So those are the things that come to us first in mind, but also we didn't build a school last year. So the year before, we were rebuilding Campobello campus. It cost about $16 million. And so those expenditures also didn't occur last year. It's interesting when we look at the expenditures from last year across all different funds. Salaries were actually up because we did negotiate higher salaries, but really where we see the cost savings are probably not surprisingly are in areas such as purchase services and supplies that just weren't being utilized the final quarter and through the summer. So that was where we saw some of the big systemic changes. The district continues to receive a majority or 56% of its revenues from those local taxpayers, followed by 29% from the state of Arizona in the form of state aid and grants. Federal and state revenues actually stayed the same as from the prior year at 7%, with local revenues going down by 2%. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So local revenues are those revenues we generally collect from parents or taxpayer or community members. So the areas that we really saw local revenues go down this past school year, of course, was food service, community education, tuition that we get from our private schools or foreign tuition students, as well as things like rent on our facilities. Those didn't occur once COVID hit. So those are just some examples of the things that we saw go down and why local revenue went down by about 2%. State revenue actually did go up as a percentage of the total. And that's because we saw an additional increase in state funding in terms of 20 by 20 funds. Remember, there was the district additional assistance refunding that we received last year. So those were kind of the shifts that we saw last year. So not a lot of change, but there were some impacts from COVID. Moving on to take a look at expenditures specifically by fund. So what we've been talking about up till now is across all of our funds that we have in the district. So expenditure breakdowns at by fund has M&O with total expenditures of almost $216 million or $5 million more than last year. So while there was an increase in funding due to inflation in the 20 by 20 plan, we did have a decrease in expenditures, as I just talked about before, for purchase services and supplies. Principal and interest payments for the debt service fund were about $57 million. And the bond building fund was just under $38 million. And as I mentioned, that was a decrease from the prior year because we weren't building a new school. So guess what's going to happen next year, guys? It's going to go back up. But that's what we saw was last year was not any new construction. Federal and state expenditures were down about $2 million to $17.7 million. Wasn't directly related to any specific program, kind of an across the board decrease. Classroom site fund expenditures were down about $1 million to $16.3 million, and that was an anticipated decrease. If you remember in the prior year, there was a decrease in funding because there was an adjustment to how we receive funds due to state lands where school districts received a one-time payout. Guess what? The one-time payout didn't occur this past year. Other fund expenditures were also slightly down, about $2 million, so not a lot, to about $33 million.
Mrs.
That was
Feldman, I
kind
have
of
a quick
spread
question
across all funds.
on that slide.
I'm sorry?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
What we have here.
Did you find my error? I couldn't remember when it got printed out.
Okay, I just wanted to make
apologize.
sure that this was right or that was right.
Yeah. So for those of you at home and in the audience, the ones that were printed out for the board members, I had not updated the M&O expenditure slide. So what you're seeing before you, I couldn't remember quite when that occurred. We got it corrected. So
Thank you. I just
the
wanted to
number
make
I
sure.
just presented, yes. And by the way, you do get the star.
Thank you.
Actually, one point in time, I thought I should bring a sticker, but that would be getting too close. So this is why you review things, right? Okay, so let's look at how we actually spend our budget across the district. This looks at our basic operating funds. Just as a reminder, these are the funds that we look at to supply our day-to-day operational costs across the district. For us, that includes the M&O fund, the classroom site funds, the instructional improvement fund, and remember that's the Indian gaming funds, and the indirect cost funds. The other fund that we haven't additionally to that is the Medicaid reimbursement program, where we are reimbursed for providing medically related services to our special education students. As in almost every year I've ever given this presentation, 85% of these expenditures are rated to salaries and benefits. And I'm not kidding, it's only varied by 1% over the entire time I've done this presentation, with the remainder being split between supplies and purchase services. And yes, that's the same. So that's kind of where we are. We spend the majority of our revenue in salaries and benefits, in people doing things. This is a slide I know everyone finds kind of interesting. So this is what shows how we compare with other districts as well as some national averages. Every year, the Arizona Auditor General produces a school district spending report, which sometimes you'll hear referred to as the classroom dollars report. Now, so everything we've talked up to this point is 1920 information. The information in front of you right now, 1819. So what the auditor is doing is that data we just turned in that we were just looking at, they're churning it through and they'll be issuing this report in a couple of months. So this is the year prior. Let's see. So while we continue to spend more in the classroom and less on administration than other districts in the state, and you can see that our average in PVs, we spend about, remember there's that concept of classroom dollars being instruction only. And then the battle we had that's really not the holistic view of our student costs. We have a separate line where we have classroom dollars where we include those support dollars that go directly to support our students and instruction. So that's why you see the two different lines here. So PV spends about $5,200 in classroom dollars when you look strictly at instruction. And then the range for the state and peer averages is about 4,800 to 4,900. Peer average means districts that are similar to our size and also similar to the setting, so a large metropolitan area. In In our size, mostly that only occurs in metropolitan. We also do really well when you include student instructional support. So we spend about $6,500 per pupil. The range, but for both the peer and the state average, is about $6,100. The big difference is when we start looking at administrative costs, and those administrative costs really range anywhere from a school level cost to a central office cost. We spend about $740. Peer average is about $745. The state average is $903. That's where you can really see that impact of small schools. So definitely makes a difference. One of the more interesting numbers that I pulled out for you here comes from the National Center for Educational Statistics. It's the national average column on the very right. Let me point out that this data is actually from 2017. So it's 2 years back compared to every other number on the slide. So bear that in mind when you look at these amazingly different numbers. So the national average for dollars in the classroom is about $7,000, almost $800 compared to our $5,200. And as you see, we do really well in the state. So it is just atrociously different. Remember, it's 2 years different. Just makes it even better. As is normal, our administrative costs are about half of what the national administrative costs are across the United States. So it's very, very consistent to what it's been in the past. Historically, there's been another part of the Auditor General report that is called the financial stress. If you remember, when we were coming out of the recession, financial stress tests were a big thing for banks and other institutions, and they applied those same concepts to school districts. So Paradise Valley has always ranked really low on the stress level based on the criteria set by the Auditor General's office. That's a section that has been removed. If you've looked at the Classroom Dollars report, was removed in this most recent report. And they are working to actually replace it with a different calculation. I don't know the intimate knowledge of what it will be, but they are looking to issue that report in several months. And I would suspect we still come out low risk. But if you noted, that is a change from prior year data. There's one quirky thing I would like to review with you before we move on and take any questions. And I ask you to ratify this annual financial report, and that's regarding cash. We tend not to talk about cash because cash is important. It makes the world go around. It really has very little to impact how we run our programs. Now, maybe that's not true in community ed, but in our day-to-day operations, cash really is not an issue. If we don't have enough cash, we have short-term borrowing that's available to us from the county treasurer's office. But there was actually a change in the way the taxes were calculated, was a change in state statute several years ago. And what it's had, the result has been, is that when a district is decreasing in enrollment, you're seeing increased cash, because the calculation for the tax rate no longer involves the calculation or involves cash balance being a piece of it. So as your enrollment is going down, you have taxed at a higher rate for having more students. So that's kind of the position we're in. We're like many other districts. This is an area where the Auditor General is actually reviewing the situation because it's very widespread. And we have been given the heads up. There's a couple of legislators looking to actually place legislation before the next session to discuss this issue. So I don't know if any of you caught it, but we have about $45 million in M&O cash. Doesn't that sound like a lot of money? It's a ton of money. But unfortunately, we only have about $19 million of that we are capable of spending, because we are limited in how much we can spend based on a formula within state law. It's not dependent on how much cash that we have. I, of course, don't like this because this means we are holding on to taxes we have generated, and they need to be returned to our taxpayers. $19 million is typically higher than we also have for a carry forward. But to be frank, I suspect it will be rapidly spent down this year, dealing with COVID expenditures, particularly in areas that are not supported by the taxes. Chester's community education, and food service. So I did want to talk about that in case you noticed that, because it really is coming in out of balance. Historically, cash was included, and so we were able to balance our tax rates correctly. So anyway, look forward to that hopefully coming up in the next legislative session. So that completes my presentation regarding the year-end financials for 2019-2020. And I do ask for ratification of this report. We'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank Mrs. Felton. Mrs. Case, may I have a motion to ratify, and then we'll get to questions.
So moved.
Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Felton? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Sorry, I was late.
That's
Aye.
okay. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. You have ratification. Next on the agenda is acceptance of gifts and donations. As always, we thank all of our donors, but I would like to point out a few in particular. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Cyril and Virginie Bordier, I apologize for not knowing which pronunciation is correct, donated $1,700 for classroom supplies for 4th, 5th, and 6th grades at Desert Trails Elementary. Rebecca Clout donated just under $1,153 for the principal's discretionary fund at Pinnacle Peak Prep. Sandpiper PTO donated just under $6,400 for the Renaissance Learning Program at Sandpiper. And Robert and Catherine Milligan donated $10,000 to the principal's discretionary fund at Sunrise Middle School. Again, we thank all of our donors, and I would appreciate a motion to approve the report. Ms. Case?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda are items for discussion. So obviously no motions or actions will be taken. First is the update of the bond and budget override programs and capital improvement programs. And I will again turn it over to Mrs. Felton.
Thank you again, President Greenberg, Governing Board, and Dr. Welsh. This is the annual update of the district's capital programs and overrides as required by Arizona Revised Statute 15481 and 491. So what we're covering this evening is statutorily required, but do ask me if you have any more detailed questions. So we actually have 2 bond authorizations that we are in the middle of expending. In 2015, taxpayers authorized $228 million bond plan that include furniture, equipment, and technology, totaling approximately $81 million. And those included things like allocations for schools and departments, as well as the replacement of copier fleet and a new fiber optic network. $5.8 million was allocated for the replacement of buses. And also included was about $147 million for facilities, buildings, and grounds, including $65 million for new instructional facilities. The plan also included about $11.5 million for the purchase of land. So if you remember what that plan was the plan about 5 years ago. As you can see, it looks a lot like the current plan that we had in 2019. Because we have found it has worked successfully for us. In fiscal year 2019-20, we did spend down some of these funds. These were the remainders of the funds. And as you can see, we had total expenditures of about $36 million with about $25.5 million for facilities and the remainder of it sprinkled through the different areas we discussed. One of the things I would point out is we are required to actually track expenditures by administrative and what they call non-administrative, but I think most people would call instructional areas. Okay, so this is just kind of a summary of where we are on this bond authorization. So of the $228 million that was authorized, this current year we spent about $36.5 million. Within prior years, we spent $121.5 remaining million dollars, with a remaining balance of about $70 million within that. That's set to fund our new construction on elementary school 33, which I hope to have a new name for soon. That's my little goal. And then when we do have a study session in December, we will be talking about how you would like us to expend the rest of those funds, what you would like to do with that. So there's a little teaser to help excite you for that meeting that's coming up, I'm sorry, in December. So then, no, come on. You got to play it up. Come on. Okay, so a very similar format you'll see here for the 2019 bond authorization. The amount did increase slightly to $236 million, but you can see the categories are very similar. So some of the big changes within here is the facilities, buildings, and grounds, that $152 million in the non-administrative portion does include the cost for a new elementary school on the east side of Desert Ridge. So just to remind you, that was mentioned, I believe, at the last board meeting. Someone called it a new middle school. It's actually a new elementary school that's within here. As always, we hope to have the land donated, but in case the land is not donated, we have allocated $15 million for that. This money was actually budgeted to help support the allocations in this current school year, the 2021 school year. But as you can see, we did end up with about $1.1 million of expenditures out of this. And really what this helped fund for us were our technology needs we had this summer for COVID. That was really the area, how we sped up some purchasing of devices, and much of it was funded out of this. Oh, so I'm sorry, which relieves us with almost the entire program left of about $235 million. The plan really was for expenditures to start this school year. But it was very nice to have it given the crazy circumstances we had. So that's what we have in existence for us with bond programs. But the capital plan was actually split between two different funding sources. If you remember, by state law, we can have certain kinds of expenditures out of bonds, and we can have certain kinds of expenditures out of capital overrides. So moving over to the other funding source now is the capital override, now called District Additional Assistance Override. Did you all learn that? Remember when I was doing my little presentations? Is that still in your brain somewhere? So we are doing some of the final spin down of the 2011 capital plan. It originally was about $37 million, and it was broken into two parts. And so these were two parts that were not allowed to be funded, or not clearly allowed to be funded out of bond. They're instructional materials and it's support vehicles. So vehicles that transport pupils can be purchased from bonds, but any other kind of support vehicle, be it transportation, technology, even some of our smaller special education vehicles can't be purchased through that. And so when we combine those two, we were looking about a $41 million program over 7 years. If you remember, we kind of spread that funding out over 8 years. So it met up better with our bond program. So we had 1 year, being last year, that didn't receive additional funding. So we tried to stretch it out. So this is where we are between those two specific lines. We did not spend as much last year as we typically would have, because honestly, there just weren't folks in the schools ordering those kinds of supplies. So we do have about $4.6 million remaining from that program. Quite a bit of that actually, as you can see, is in instructional materials is for Dr. Corson in the textbooks adoptions area. So that will give him a little incentive. Go Dan. As a reminder, This also was a part of the 2019 capital plan. It's not being presented before you this evening because the funding for it doesn't actually start until the 2021 school year. So bonds we were actually able to sell in the spring. So that was why it was presented to you. The funding for the 2019 district additional assistance won't be presented till next year when the funding occurs. Had anyone caught that? Yeah. Did you get them? No? All right. All right. So moving on to a different section of the requirements for us of those statutory guidelines is talking about support that we receive from the school facilities boards. We receive two different kinds of pots of money. And the first one being the building renewal grant. If anyone's heard me speak, you will know I still hold a grudge because the state took away building renewal funding from us, which was a per pupil based funding, and gave us a much more complicated, much smaller pot of money called grant based funding for building renewal. We do actively go after it. We received and expended $82,000 last year, and we'll be talking about part of that. This is another teaser. I'm full of teasers tonight, so pay attention when we talk about the summer bond programs, and we'll talk about a cooling tower that they help fund, and we'll talk about what they didn't pay for, because they don't pay for everything, but they'll pay for some of it. We do actually have funds available to us that we've been hanging on to forever. It's called New School Facilities. Back when the School Facilities Fund more readily helped support new schools, we were given money to help with some of the startup costs for new schools. We actually spent part of it because one of those schools that they funded almost 20 years ago was Elementary School 33. So you will see that we spent about $7,800 in expenses for things such as survey work, architectural, archaeological work, groundwork, water work, those kinds of things. And we do have about $16,000 remaining in that, and it will cover 3 additional new schools. About 15,700. I think I said 16,000. Yeah. It just keeps earning interest, and I won't let them take it away because we will build those schools sometime, and I make sure everybody knows what that money's for. Don't use it for anything else. So one of the things we do need to discuss is the future plans in relationship to capital funding. And so it is an interesting time of year. We did last year just wrap up an election in November 2019 that was based on a capital plan that was a 4-year capital plan. So it will actually take us to 2023, 2024. So probably in the year before that, you will be looking at having a capital planning committee and hopefully going out for election. And I will help support you in that. You just let me know. I'll show up. I'll work on it. Other thing we need to discuss at this presentation this evening is our maintenance and operation override. This has been in place since 2017. And the purpose of that in the ballot language that we came up with, and again, there was a committee that actually developed to this purpose, was to ensure current academic programming remains in place, because now that it is in place, it's supporting an existing program. We wanted to provide competitive salaries and be able to retain and attract our staff. We wanted to continue instruction for some of those supplemental areas, not necessarily the core areas. And you can see the list of other programs they were looking at. And as always, we wanted to promote safe and healthy environments for our students. So last school year, we had about $27.5 million that was generated from the M&O override. This year, actually, we have budgeted $28.9 million. We will not receive that much in M&O funding because our student enrollment has gone down. And as we've talked about, the governor has allocated some of his CARES funding by ESG grants. It's enrollment stabilization grants, but those grants only support base funding. They won't help cover M&O override losses due to student enrollment losses. And so we are looking at almost $2 million loss So when we revise the budget in December, that number will go down. But this is correct as of the budget that is adopted right now. They don't ever mention that, do they? And they talk about that stabilization grant. Okay, so this does go over the areas that are required by statute. We will be talking about some of the specific bond programs in our next presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Felton. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Felton? No, this is discussion only. Okay, Mrs. Case?
Just for clarity for the people who are online listening,
Yes, ma'am.
could you explain the calendar when it starts and stops? I mean,
Oh, the fiscal year?
yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So we are not on a typical July through December calendar. We are on a fiscal year calendar that matches the state of Arizona. So our fiscal year does start July 1st and end on June 30th of every year. And it is slightly off from the federal calendar, which is based off of a September, October change.
I just have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So, for new school facilities, we have $15,795 left for startup costs for 3 schools.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
So let's round down for ease sake.
You're
That's
rounding-
$5,000
For easy math,
Yeah, 5,000. I became a social worker for a reason.
I round too. It's a beautiful thing.
$5,000 per school to start up.
You know-
I mean, how many desks does that buy?
Okay, you know what? Let me clarify that.
Okay,
It's
let's-
startup for construction.
Okay.
So it's when you're going out and doing an assessment on the land. The idea was you would then be going to the school facility board and coming up with a full building request of the school facility board so that they would fund the school. This helped those helped with the startup costs to develop the plan. You then took to the school facility board and they approved back when they approved things.
All right. Thank you.
And
My
I
second-
apologize.
No, my second question is about the school facilities board. Now,
Uh-oh.
we've built how many schools in the past 10 years?
Our district?
Yeah.
Is that the question? 4 or 5?
And how much money have we gotten from school facilities board for those?
0.
Okay. So if we did not have a bond approved by voters, we would not have been able to build those schools.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. I just want to clarify that those shiny new buildings, right? Fireside, Wildfire,
Even Larkspur,
Elementary
Campobello.
33, Larkspur,
Mhm.
all of those would not have happened.
That's correct.
Campobello's renew, Roadrunner renew, none of that would have happened.
We did get a little new school money when we built Pinnacle Peak.
And that was how long ago?
I don't remember.
Like 15?
Yeah, and it really was just like $1 million and 1.5 million. I can't quite remember.
Okay. So building renewal grants that we got from SFD, we say we have just over $82,000.
We're very excited about it too.
Yeah. How much did we actually spend on building renewal?
Well, you can really look at the construction costs.
Yeah.
And within the bond program.
So is that facilities, buildings, grounds?
Yes.
So that's 25.6 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, without the bond,
Yes.
none of that would have happened.
That's correct. And how that would work is we would have to take money out of our maintenance and operations fund and spend it on capital projects.
And in the last presentation, you told us that that's 85% salaries and benefits. So
Yes.
if you make a dent to M&O, you are decreasing salaries and benefits for employees.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And actually again, another teaser, I am full of it tonight. When we go through that bond, summer bond program, I will talk about a specific circumstance of where our district standards are higher than the school facility board's building standards, but you're going to see what it costs to build to their standards. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit.
And also just want to clarify that these are things we have to do by statute, these reports that we're doing right now.
Oh, yes,
correct?
ma'am.
So we can't get out of it. We have to do these.
But I would want to report out.
Yeah, I think it's important for people
Yes.
to hear, but I also think they need to know that we have some responsibilities legally.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sure there's people wondering why we're talking about these kinds of things
Yes.
when there's other crises going on. So I just wanted to clarify that for the audience.
And they tell us that we have to do it now. So,
right. Not only that we have to do it, but when we have to do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
The state legislature tells us that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have a quick one. When we were writing down state facility board money, did they have anything to do with a Liberty rebuild? Didn't we get some funding there? I
That's an
realize that was a
interesting question.
long time
Oh, you know
ago.
what? This is where it pays for me to have been around forever. Liberty Rebuild was actually not a new school rebuild.
Okay.
It was a deficiency correction because they found mold at the property. So it was school facility board funded, but not through the new schools process.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to clarify.
Remember
I knew
that
we'd gotten
instance?
something from them, so
Right. Yes, ma'am.
it was because they had to.
Mhm.
All right. If there's nothing else on this topic, next is presentation of facilities 2020 summer construction projects. Back over to you, Mrs. Felton.
Oh, I hope I live up to my teasers. Pressure's on. I guess. Okay. Well, thank you, President Greenberg, Governing Board, Dr. Welsh, and in particular for this presentation, the PV Schools taxpayers, for it's not without their support at the ballot box, much of this work would not be completed or would have to come out of other funds that we use to support our classrooms. See, I had that written already. I could tell where you were going. I do have a favorite project, as I always do when I do this presentation. We'll see if you guys can figure out which one's my favorite project tonight. Okay. But everyone loves new flooring. I think it's up there with new paint, new parking lot we all love. We do have a life cycle management for our flooring projects. We spent about $870,000 this summer on flooring. And what you see here is our typical flooring. It's what we also have in this boardroom is we do use carpet tiles. It has about a 10-year lifespan. And it really typically does make it to about 10 years because if something occurs, you just replace the tile and not necessarily the entire room as compared to rolled carpeting. So I'm letting you know some little secrets about why we do what we do this evening also. Here's an example at Shea. They did when we try to kind of focus some of our work, our major work on sites so that we're not in and out of every single classroom and we try to focus some work. And so one example was Shea, where they did get flooring in the classrooms, as you see. If you remember, it's been a couple of years, but we actually went through and reworked the locker rooms at our high schools. If you remember that, we did all of the high schools except for Pinnacle being our newest. It was actually in pretty good shape. We're now starting to do work on our middle school locker rooms. So Shea received flooring at their middle school locker room. And just as a reminder, when they do those kind of projects, they actually go in, evaluate what work needs to be done. They do look at everything from lockers to flooring to plumbing to showers. If you remember, we've talked about showers in locker rooms. So at this point, though, Shea just did include the flooring. A summer project we weren't anticipating being a summer project was one of our early on COVID projects, which were the hand washing sinks. And just as a reminder, 2 new hand washing sinks were installed at every elementary and middle school. I hope when you did your first day visit, you got to see those sinks in action. It is pretty amazing how they can get a whole grade level through, both at the beginning of the day and at lunch and things like that. The hand washing sinks do obviously include soap and paper towels. They just weren't there when they took these pictures. So they really do exist though. All right, here's Exhibit A. I've been talking about Exhibit A. We spent almost $1.3 million on a cooling tower at Wildfire Elementary School. Who thinks Wildfire Elementary School is one of our newer schools? I mean, it's not a new, but it's on the new end. Well, guess what? We put a cooling tower in for $1.3 million. Yeah, 14. Oh, that's right. You would know that. Dr. Bales was our opening principal, so 14 years old. So at the time this was built, it was built to school facility board standards, which includes a galvanized cooling tower. Well, in Arizona hard water environments, they have a lifespan of about 14 years. 14 years. This is a project school facility board did help us fund. So the total cost wasn't $1.3 million. It would have been more. This is an example of where we did fund. Oh, you know what? I do apologize. I do think the 1.3 is actually both costs. I apologize. But we did pay the additional cost because we wanted to put one in that was stainless steel that would have a lifespan of longer than 14 years. So it wasn't that this cooling tower actually had some malfunction, was having a problem. It's the normal lifespan. But this is kind of a shortcoming sometimes of school facility boards standards is they tend to be a shorter lifespan than you would typically hope a cooling tower would be. I would also comment that we're kind of moving away from cooling towers in particularly our elementary schools or our classes or our schools that have smaller spaces such as classrooms. And we're going to the individual units because what happens is if a cooling tower goes down, you can lose cooling in an entire school or an entire building, and it impacts the entire campus. When you go to the individual package units, you may have a classroom down, or you may have a couple of classrooms down, or if you have a unit go down in a multi-purpose room, you probably have 3 or 4 other units that can take over the cooling of that space, and the space is still able to be utilized. So just to let you know, that's kind of one of the transformations we've been making. We do use cooling towers, certainly in our larger spaces, such as high school auditoriums and high school gyms and things like that. Do you feel smarter? I felt smarter after that one. But this is an area where we did have some funding from the school facility board this past year. And by the way, that was my favorite slide. I learned so much about cooling towers. It's so exciting. But that being said, everyone loves a beautiful new parking lot. We do survey parking lots every year because it is important to maintain a parking lot. Once it starts to deteriorate, you can run into very expensive repairs very quickly. And so here are 2 examples at Quail Run and Indian Bend. It's not necessarily a life cycle replacement like you see with carpeting because it is exposed to the outside and is impacted by water around it. So really, when we replace parking lots, a lot of times it's based on the condition of the parking lots across the district. But everyone loves a pretty parking lot, don't we? They make you feel so good when you drive in. You know, one thing we do with parking lots too is we will go in and repair parking lots and paint them every summer, not necessarily do just across the board repairs or replacements. One of the things I did want to share with you this evening is about our playgrounds. So we actually did work at 18 different playgrounds this summer, and it varied what needed to occur at each site, anything from new equipment, replacement of the rubber fall space, canopies, wood chip areas, replacement, those kinds of things. So really, and that is all at elementary schools, by the way. So I don't know that you're aware. I do want to let you know, we actually have a gentleman that works for us. His name is Johnny Glenny, and he is the district lead of playgrounds. Is that like not an awesome job? What's your job? Well, I'm the lead of playgrounds for a school district. Is that not sound like someone you would love to chat with for the evening? But anyway, it is a position that was actually added a number of years ago because we were having to actually hire consultants to come in and do our playground surveys. We spent more hiring a consultant and we didn't get them all year long. Mr. Glenny really has been a really wonderful addition. The position actually requires a national certification and as a playground inspector. Did you know that was a thing? And that comes from the National Parks and Recreation Board. And I must just say that it's been passed along to us that he really takes this job seriously and continuously works at becoming up to speed and understanding really what gives safe playgrounds for our students. So he takes it seriously. So it's kind of fun, give you a little experience of what's going on with our playgrounds. Mercury Mine Sunrise had a replacement of canopies, about $430,000 this summer. This is a really good example of just projects that need to occur to allow for safety of our school campuses. This was a canopy that was deteriorating. It had water leaking through it. It was just not a safe environment when it was raining. So that's a really good example. This summer was the summer of high school tennis court resurfacing. So all high school tennis courts got resurfaced. They do evaluate the surfaces of all of the courts. And so Mercury Mine needed to be resurfaced. So it looks very pretty there too. Look at that. Don't you just want to go play tennis over at North Canyon? That's gorgeous. Every summer, about 2 or 3 elementary schools get a total school renovation. When we say that, what we mean is they go through and they evaluate the flooring, the painting, the cabinetry. You see the beautiful cabinetry on the right. It's not orange, whatever color it probably used to be. But they'll also go through and evaluate the lighting, the ceiling tiles. They kind of just do a total evaluation of the school site. This summer, we did work at North Ranch. And again, as I say, they like to go in and do a lot of work at once. So those are the school sites that, guess what? They didn't house summer school this summer if we had had summer school. But they try to focus their energy on these larger projects. So this year, we did North Ranch at about $800,000 and Quail Run at almost $700,000. But I should have gotten what color those cabinets were, but I'm sure you have all seen the old cabinet and millwork in school. So we are working at replacing that on a rotating basis. Okay, next up is security cameras. This is something that was a specific request by the 2019 Capital Planning Committee. And so we did work at the middle schools and the high schools. There are now at least 6 security cameras at each middle school and at least 10 at each high school. The plan did call for security cameras district-wide. So the plan is for 1/3 of each elementary school to receive their security cameras in the next 3 years. So the remainder of the capital plan. And the comment I have heard is they have actually done a pretty good job at catching vandalism. So the quality of the cameras has really increased. I don't know if you've seen some of that old security footage, but it was so grainy that it wasn't always very useful. So it's much more useful these days. So that's kind of nice to hear. This is an example of a project that we did that was COVID related. When we did the security projects across the district, we provided security screenings in the front reception areas of most of our schools and offices. The district administrative center didn't receive one. They didn't want to be blocked off from the community. But with COVID, we did come in for about $9,000. Gave them something similar, although it is not bullet resistant glass. It is plexiglass at this point because we needed to get it up. And so I think that turned out nicely. I hope the ladies like it. We don't want to cut them off from the community, but we want to be safe. And then a couple projects we've discussed before, but just to kind of give you a little summary. North Canyon High School Performing Arts Center, as you know, is being renovated. This summer, they did the back of the house, which as you can see is the areas in which students actually have classes. So you see those 2 classroom spaces where they did about $2 million worth of work this summer. And of course, they are continuing it through the year. But it's the spaces that are not necessarily used in day-to-day classrooms. Next up, we have our elementary school number 33. I would love to see this thing renamed. And we have all recently been out there, so we all know that they're now up to above the second story, so well into the second story of masonry block. So that's very exciting. Here's a breakdown of the other projects that are in the works or completed. So as you can see, many of them are just projects that are ongoing maintenance of our buildings. And as you can see, there are things like fencing, roofing, painting, but even fire security, electrical, and plumbing are evaluated regularly. And so are repaired as needed and kept in proper maintenance. I would like to add that as we're moving forward, you'll see in the third line down, doors, hardware, and RS2 access controls. Talk about using slang, but what that is card readers. We're trying to standardize card readers across our buildings. Most main entries are card reader access now. We're moving now to actually having keyless schools and have them being card readers. But that will actually be a multi-capital year plan goal if that is where we determine to go. If that is a huge project, but we are working on doing that. Further down there, you will see we have discussed the fuel tank replacement. I was really kind of bummed out there wasn't a picture for you because I thought that would be kind of fun to see what those look like, right? They're underground. So what do they look like? But unfortunately, that project has been caught up in bureaucratic red tape. So there's not a picture to show you. But, I do have to feel for those governmental entities that are holding us up because I know they're just trying to be responsible to the public. So when we look at all the projects that were completed or well into progress through the summer, we have about $50 million in projects that were in process over the summer or completed. What are you pointing at? Oh, okay. Can I answer his question? Is that okay? I had a question from, what do you call people in the audience? The SES service entry section upgrades. I apologize. Actually meant to change that. And what those are is where the electrical systems come in and meet up between the utilities and our buildings. And when we did the electrical survey, there was a recommendation of doing improvements to those works that would provide more constant electricity that is less likely to go out. That's one of the pressure points when systems go out. So they did a lot of work, as you see, about $1.8 million this past summer on that. And frequently when you hear of power going out of a building, it's frequently at this service entry is a very common area to see it. All right, so with that completes my presentation, but I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that I can.
Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Belton? Seeing none, as always, we appreciate the pictures, we appreciate the information, we appreciate your stewardship of these projects, and always a fun time. So thank you very much. Last on the, well, not quite last, but next on the agenda is our reopening update. I will turn it over to Dr. Welsh, and then we have a card too.
Sure. Thank you, President Greenberg. Just some updates regarding where we're at in terms of reopening. I think we heard obviously a couple times earlier this evening about some of the challenges with that dual instruction model. Again, we're 9 days into that dual instruction model with in-person and PV Connect. And I do want to share that we've been hearing very loud and clear that from teachers that current model is proving extremely challenging. I think that's probably a kind way of putting it. To our teachers and of course, everybody who may be watching online, I just want everybody to know that, we are reading all of those messages that are being sent our way. We are listening to that feedback. I want to share with everyone that we are collaborating with PVAEA on a more in-depth follow-up survey to all teachers that will be going out next week that will drill down further to identify what some of those specific challenges are with that model, what specific supports we may be able to put in place to assist. And then we plan to be working based on that for some concepts for improvement, refinements, adjustments, in the near future, again, assuming that we are able to continue to teach in person, which I'll get to in a moment. I'll also share, as you probably everybody's well aware, if you saw the dashboard this morning, our cases for COVID within our district boundaries did show an increase from 36.59 to 50.17 per 100,000. This does place us in that yellow light category, indicating a warning that we may need to return to online learning in the near future if this trend continues. Percent positivity remained relatively unchanged, going from 4.34% to 4.37%. There were also some zip codes within district boundaries that had case rates in excess of 80 per 100,000, some of them getting very close to that 100 per 100,000. And just as a reminder to all, our adopted criteria have us returning to online learning should cases exceed 100 per 100,000 or percent positivity that is above 10% within the district as a whole. And I just want to remind everyone in our community, our families, to please engage in safe and responsible behavior so that we can hopefully stop this upward trend and remain open for in-person learning. I'll also share we updated our COVID-19 dashboard this morning to include cases at each school from this week of October 12th through the 18th. And we added a cumulative total for the number of cases reported at each site since we began in-person learning on October 5th. For those who may need the link, again, that's on our pvschools.net/reopening site. A couple of other detail pieces, but I think are very important. Our shipment of Bluetooth headsets for teachers to use with their PV Connect students, finally, after some delays due to the wildfires in California, arrived on Monday. Were distributed out to schools earlier this week. Also, in terms of fine arts, Mr. Taylor's collected information from band directors regarding instrument covers. These are not cases for instruments. I know it might sound like that. These are covers that if it's a, for example, with a brass instrument, it would cover the bell of the instrument. For some of the other wind instruments with multiple holes, it actually covers the full instrument, but allows the player to be able to play flexibly within that sleeve. It was identified that using our current vendor, we would actually be experiencing a delay of approximately 4 weeks until they delivered. So we're going to be using some flexibility for emergency procurement, as is outlined in Executive Order 2020-41, as we've identified another vendor that is going to be able to provide those in a much more expedited time frame. And then finally, we also received some information from the Arizona Department of Health Services through County Superintendent Watson's office regarding 3 possible options for making testing available to families who have had a positive exposure to COVID-19. And so based on input from our lead nurses, from student services, and from cabinet, we'll be sharing information regarding the availability of free testing. It's actually through Banner Health urgent care sites. Some of the other options that were included, the other 2 were contacting the county every time there was a positive case and having to work with them to schedule an independent vendor to come out. They indicated there would be a delay of at least 1 to 2 days before that happened. We didn't feel that that was going to be super helpful. The other option was the Abbott BNAX Now rapid point of care tests that you might have heard from in the announcement from Governor Ducey a few weeks ago. The information provided by the county health department indicated that these tests have a very high false negative rate, and particularly in individuals who are asymptomatic or in the early onset stages of symptoms. So based upon that, we felt like that first option was probably the best option to be able to provide quick and, again, at no cost care so that people could get tested. And just as a reminder to everybody, per county health requirements, if someone has a positive exposure to COVID-19, that a negative test does not allow them to return earlier than that 14-day quarantine period, unfortunately. That concludes my comments for that. Again, I'd be happy to answer questions regarding reopening and next steps.
Okay, I do have a request to address the board, so I think it makes sense that we move to Mrs. Susan Seep. And in that you are representing PVA, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to smile so you can see my smile. President Greenberg, Dr. Welsh, Governing Board and Cabinet, I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight In fact, I feel it's incredibly important to mention how grateful I am to have leaders that welcome communication from every employee. I'm proud to be in Paradise Valley, and I couldn't be prouder of my colleagues in PVA. They are world-class educators and by far the best Arizona has to offer. We are going to lose more than we already have already if we don't listen to them tonight. The certified educators are demoralized right now. They feel like every solution that has been needed to account for kids' safety, families' comfort, and the district's reputation has landed on their plates, and nothing has come off. Spelling bees, instructional coaching, and committee work all continues as if nothing unusual were happening, and all teachers are getting the regular attaboys, encouragement to take care of themselves. When is what they're asking me. When am I supposed to do that? They're disappointed that our district's dashboard does not reflect the daily changes in case counts around the district, and believe that the decision to delay the data by 2 weeks that Maricopa County's dashboard is using is disingenuous. A trick made to seem things that are better than they are when they know that it is possible for our district to update that dashboard every day. They are concerned that there have been no clear metrics or case counts established for the shutdown of a site, every site in a particular zip code, or even the entire district. I am asking that those be established tonight. Given the alarming rise in cases this week and knowing that that data is 2 weeks old, we want to trust our board and our leaders, but it's becoming difficult when there is such a wide discrepancy between what we see with our own eyes and how those realities are being communicated to the public. I am here tonight to try and shine a light on the results of what has been months of collaboration and communication about how to best meet the needs of our students and continue the worthy mission of this district. We seem to have collaborated ourselves right into a corner, and the teachers are asking, they're begging that the current plan be revised. It isn't working. They're asking for more flexibility, better protection, some relief, extra support, and time. It cannot wait until January. We know that one size does not fit all for our students. Everything we do is individualized, differentiated, adapted, and modified to meet students where they are. We have not allowed teacher sites and special areas to determine the best situation for each classroom, grade level, or curricular area. We've lost so many teachers already, and more will follow, even though the remedies they have sought have been made available to others. Our special education professionals and related services staff is our best example. They deserve the opportunity to be able to demonstrate the ability to do their jobs virtually when possible, instead of claiming that equity means everyone has to do everything the same way. So much has been done to protect our students. We have rules about masks on playgrounds, fun icons for lining up safely, stretching out lunches for hours and hours to accommodate everyone in the cafeterias. But they have all been issued a disinfecting spray that reads antibacterial, not antiviral. I have no words. They are overwhelmed. They are exhausted. They're overwrought. It isn't about their age, nor their experience or technological know-how. As one teacher put it, my doctor's not even worried about me catching COVID. He thinks the stress and lack of sleep will kill me long before I've got time to catch it. We are asking for relief now for some of the day-to-day responsibilities we always have. Is it really important that we organize a spelling bee that can be held in person and virtually and fairly? How long will that take to set up? And what do you think parents and administrators want the teachers not to do while that happens? Maybe it's lesson planning, parent phone calls, or writing up some of the new integrated ESL lesson plans that are now part of the new SEI model this week. And just so you know, it better not be any of those. We're asking for more support, not just technology and training, possibly some of our own social emotional support. We could use some early release time, not just PLCs, plans, and student data. Teachers are hanging on by a thread. We're asking for time. We believe the schedules can be adjusted for January, but in the meantime, what about late starts and early releases? What about asynchronous days to plan and work with others to find ways of being more effective? We are in this together, and no one has forgotten the ultimate goal, our students' learning and well-being. We cannot continue to be asked to fill in every gap created by this crisis. We were brought into this profession by our tendency to want to do anything we can. It's beginning to feel like you're taking advantage of us. It will not stop until you stop it.
I agree.
Thank you, Mrs. C. Mrs. Case? I thought, I'm sorry.
Thank
Dr. Walsh,
you.
you want to?
Thank you very much. You summarized many of the letters we have received and the teachers I have spoken with. I have children in other states, and in one district, the teachers are losing it so bad that they took off every Friday so they would have time to do some catch up, and they made assignments to the kids because they were losing it, and the anxiety levels were out of the, I mean, I don't know what the answers are, but I think our teachers know some answers. And I in my limited, very limited teaching compared to what these teachers have done, if I had to take a phone call for 20 seconds because the doctor was calling me back, it would take me at least 10 minutes to get the kids back on track to where I was. And and that's wasted time. And these teachers are being interrupted online constantly. It is totally when you teach, it's it's kind of like a play. And you go into it and you have the beginning and the end, and you've got to get it going, and you've got to get the engagement, and you got to get the audience engaged. And if you get interrupted, you miss the flow of the teaching, the art of teaching. And that's what's happening to these teachers. And they're having to deal with technical things going down. And we can't do this. You and I had a conversation a month ago, maybe. And you talked about two teachers who went into this knowing they were going to flow in and out, kids online, kids in class. And they agreed to help each other. One was going to teach online and was going to teach in class. And sometimes one would have a bigger group and one would have a smaller group, and the kids knew each other and they switched around. That's just one idea. There are so many ideas that we can have. And we can't expect this from our teachers. We might have to combine a second grade class from this school online with a second grade class from a different school online. It's time to think about our teachers, because if our teachers fall apart, our kids are not going to get an education. And in talking to my particular friend that I read on my from my text earlier at the beginning of the meeting in my comments, she said, I'm not teaching either as well as I need to. So ultimately, it's the kids' learning and education that's having difficulties. And we just can't do this. They're going to burn, and we're going to lose the best teachers that we have assembled here in PV. So, and we can't wait 2 months. We have to do it now. And it's going to have to take a lot of but we're going to need the teachers' input as to how to put this all together. And if you want to respond with any other ideas, I would love to hear more of your ideas. I know you've spent hours on this, and I would love to have some of your ideas because you're in the trenches. Can she say more? Is that possible? If I'm asking her a question?
She can because it's an agenda item.
Okay.
Yes.
Ideas.
I don't know what.
Teachers have
I think I know
amazing
everything,
ideas. Principals have amazing ideas. We've got, I think we need the freedom to separate the conversation between elementary and secondary. I think that we should allow sites to do different things, right? We have different communities and they have different needs. I talked with a principal today that thought, an asynchronous day on Wednesdays would change everything at his middle school site. I know that lots of elementary school teachers have talked about how much easier it would be to meet everyone's needs if all they could do was focus on one group at a time, whether it's morning and afternoon, whether it's day by day, whether it's hour by hour, whether it's teaming, whether it's departments, right? Where we've got great principals allowing creative solutions, there's been incredible stuff happening level by level. I think if the board and the cabinet can encourage principals to allow those conversations, incredible solutions are going to be found site by site. Some parameters, but obviously, and there are some folks that know they may have to keep doing both, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier to teach AP Calc to both at once to a bunch of seniors than it is to try and answer a kindergartner's question while you're trying to keep somebody's mask on and while you're trying to keep somebody from walking out the door. That's a different job. They need different sets of circumstances.
Or how to get back online.
Or how to
for
get back
first grade.
online. Or how to get everything done in a prep hour while the music class is happening in there. Right? I mean, we've got all kinds of conversations that we have to have, but site-based, level-based, district-wide. But everybody's ready to collaborate. I think we just need the permission.
Okay,
Our leaders need the permission.
I'd like Dr. Welsh to sort of jump in on the conversations that have been had, and then we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to the points that were made, I mean, 100% agree. This is something that obviously, again, we're 9 days into instruction. I think we're learning very quickly that this has become something that is too much to bite off. So I know in meeting with our Slack team earlier this week, we talked about that survey piece because we need to get that feedback from our teachers in terms of what things we have in place. Yeah, I think there's definitely an urgency to that as well. I know we've talked about that. And I would echo those comments too, in terms of, I think there's some options that we can look at. We want to be able to have flexibility, but within some kind of parameters too there. And I want to make sure too, that we're not prescribing actions without getting that feedback from teachers first. I think if we jump to trying to administer a solution when we don't fully understand the problem, we might perseverate that problem even greater. So I think we need to hear that voice of teachers. And I think that's why we really need that feedback from teachers to, one, identify what things, can we do right now? What things can we do that is on a, larger scale in terms of the model, where if we have to do shifting, again, all of those types of options, and weigh what are the advantages and perhaps limitations of some of those. But I know that's work that we talked about this week, and we plan to engage on to make sure that we have that in place.
So if anyone is surprised by this, I would be shocked. 6 weeks ago or more, I had a conversation with Dr. Welsh about this being unsustainable. Teaching one group and another group at the same time. This is not new. We knew this was going to be an issue. I am shocked that anyone is shocked. Everyone knew this was going to be a problem. And if we didn't know, our eyes were not open. So that's what I want to say about that. The other thing I want to say is, I don't want to hear from anyone that this is about teachers who aren't comfortable with technology, that this is about our older teachers. I don't want to hear that. That is not true. What's true is, what we have asked them to do is unsustainable. It is not able to be done. It has not anything to do with technology. It does not have to do with their age. Please, let's not be ageist, right? I'm 56 years old. Have I had to learn a lot of new tricks in this time of COVID? Yes, I have. Am I doing everything great? No. Do I occasionally have to call my children and ask them how to do something? Yes. But I don't want to be called someone who's ineffective because I'm old. Young teachers are having this problem too. So please, let's please stop the narrative that this is about teachers who don't want to do technology, who aren't good with it, who are older. It is about every teacher in every classroom being asked to do something that's impossible. That is not shocking to me, and it shouldn't be shocking to anyone else here.
Mrs. Bacon, I have almost 20 years on you. So I'm one of those old people.
I'm going to miss you, Sue.
I am an old person and I do need lots of help, but I am a technological immigrant and I accept that. However, I think, as you pointed out, 6 weeks ago, you talked about the fact that dual learning was not sustainable. I think at that time, I also, Mrs. Seep, talked about that. And yet, even that we knew it was unsustainable, 6 weeks later, we did nothing. And that is what's unacceptable to me. The other thing that's unacceptable to me is that out of Mrs. Seep's mouth came tonight, if we get to 100 cases per zip code, are we going to close the school, the elementary school in that zip code? And that we must decide. I want to hear right now if that's what we intend to do. If we have an elementary school that has 100 cases, their zip code has 100 cases per that 100,000, are we closing it? Yes or no? Well, what's the answer?
I'll just weigh in on that. I mean, based on the criteria that we had adopted that it was 100 cases per 100,000 or 10% positivity as a district. If there's something we want to do differently, I think that would probably be something that we'd have to decide, or the board would have to decide collectively if we're going to break it down to that level.
The board doesn't have to decide. The board's already decided. Are we closing the school? That's what I want to know.
Well, no, actually, Dr. Skidmore, I think what Dr. Welsh is saying is we revised our criteria. Now, we revised it as a district. We didn't revise it school by school, zip code by zip code. So the question becomes, and I guess it becomes a legal question, is if we said these are the big criteria, are we allowed the flexibility with, school by school? I would hope we are. I would hope that we, do not look at our district as a monolith and say we put these criteria in place because, quite honestly, as I think everyone knows, I had issues with the criteria. But I mean, we are looking at a zip code with 2 schools in it that is at 94.35 cases right now, and we know that that data is old. So we are probably looking at a zip code that's over 100, and 2 people who are up on this dais live in that zip code. The zip code right next to it is actually even worse. It's at 99.64. We just don't happen to have any schools in that zip code.
That doesn't mean we don't have students coming from that.
That's what that's
Or
the
employees
point. We
coming
have
from that
many
zip code.
because
Right.
that's Desert Ridge. It just doesn't happen to have any schools in that zip code. So we have 2. We have another zip code with 1 school that's just under 77 cases. Another zip code that has, you can tell what I did this afternoon, that has 9 schools in it that's over 65 cases. There is literally only 1 zip code in our boundaries that's below 20 cases. And it's not going down. We know it's not going down. So I think we need to be honest. I think we need to, make some decisions. If there is flexibility in because we cannot vote, this is a discussion item, but if you would like some guidance, my personal preference would be, yes, I think we should shut it down. I think if we have I think we need to be seriously looking at, we're talking about Greyhawk and Pinnacle Peak right now. It's 94.35. If anybody can dig into the data right now and find if it's 100, I think we need to be shutting it down and going online. I think we need to. That's my opinion.
I have a comment. I think there's a difference of cases in a community and cases at a school, especially elementary. And so I think we need to talk about and give some guidance that, I mean, shut down an elementary school that has no cases at it, that, I don't know. And so, and we are desperately asking our community to support safety protocols so that our numbers don't go up. And I think people are getting COVID tired of trying. This is not a time to give up. This is a time to take care of our kids. They need to be in school. A lot of these elementary kids, it's very difficult. We went through all those things before. But I think if you look at a lot of data, it's different carrying the COVID in elementary age children and in middle and high school. There's a difference there. So I think we can be careful that way. That's my idea. I also want to bring up something else that in talking to my friend that I read her quote from, she said that she had 2 students show up in class one day unannounced. She had been teaching them online and that they thought it was so fun, they just came. And I'm going, wow, the teacher had no idea they were coming. And I don't know what the protocols are there, but she's tried to move all her desks far away from each other and take everything out of the classroom that didn't have to be there. So she had more room to social distance and these kids showed up. I think what these teachers are going through are astronomical. And that's just something that we hadn't talked about. I wanted to get in there. Thanks.
I have a concern with if we are going to, so far, our clear guidelines were that we were basing everything based on when you go and look at the county website and you plug in our district. So from a family standpoint, I'm concerned if we just turn on a dime and say, oh, we changed. Now we're based on the zip code, not where you live, but based on where the school is. And if that is going to be what we're doing going forward, I think we need to give fair warning to families that this is going to be the new way. So it's something that people can be on lookout and be prepared for, because this would be very shocking to people who are just looking where we told them to look. And we hit 50, we're in the yellow zone now, according to what we've been promoting this whole time. And to come out tonight and say, oh, well, we're completely shifting that. I have a concern with what that does for our families. And so I would be worried about just shifting that unless we're making it, we really want to revise it all. But I think it needs to be a more holistic look at what this means.
So a couple of things. The first one is, so the CDC came out with new guidance defining close contact today or yesterday. So the updated guidance now defines close contact as being within 6 feet of someone with the virus for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period. That is every teacher and every student in every classroom in this district. There's no way that we could say any of our employees or students are not in a cumulative total of 15 minutes in a 24-hour period within 6 feet. That's something we have to think about. I think the other thing that we have to think about is, are we willing to make this call? We were willing to change the metrics quickly. Do we have the courage to do what we need to do now? Because those kids are going back to PD Connect. That's what's going to happen. And those kindergartners are going to be learning PB Connect. Do we have the courage to do that? That is my question.
Well, I agree with Mrs. Matura that probably, since we base the metric on the district as a whole, that we would need to notify those zip codes that are in danger. However, I am not willing to close an entire school district because of 2 or 3 bad zip codes. I am absolutely willing to close a zip code that gets to 100 per 100,000. That's not fair to the community up there to let us have those kids back in school when we have that kind of a caseload. Secondly, I want to say too that PV Connect, I thought, was set up to be an alternative for COVID for people who didn't want to go back to school because of COVID. Now I understand at the high school level, PV Connect is being used as, well, I'll go to school this week, but next week we're going on family vacation, so I'll be on PV Connect next week. That is going on in the high schools.
It is. It's going on in the elementary school as well. It's not going on just in high school. You got kids who decide I'm going to go for a date. You know, my family's on vacation in Prescott. I'm going to be PV Connect this week. No, that's not how this works. And you can't go in and out. It's not acceptable.
That's going on.
Exactly.
And then becomes an attendance nightmare for Mrs. C in front of her American history class.
I'd like to clarify, I did not mean that if we have one zip code going over 100, that the entire district shut down. I did not, if you thought what I meant was that if we have one zip code going over 100, that we shut the entire district down. That was not what I meant. Okay, I did mean that we need to be looking at shutting those schools down. And I do think we are at the point where if we are going to consider that, then yes, we need to let those communities know. I also want to throw into the mix the fact that Scottsdale Unified, which quite honestly is one of the reasons why 85255 is looking the way it is right now sitting at 80.17 cases per 100. According to data, if folks follow the Athena Foundation on Facebook, which I've been doing for a while, Scottsdale Unified is over 100 cases right now. Okay, this is just this is the Maricopa County reporting data. And so I quite honestly do believe that the district to the east is going to be shutting down sooner than we are. But that is part of the reason because we share those east zip codes with Scottsdale. So, you know, I'm not going to say, oh, it's all, we know it's all, we don't know where, you know, we don't have addresses of where cases are. But I think given those numbers, we can probably assume that some of this may not necessarily be occurring within the families in our district, but if this is the data we have to look at, this is the data we have to use. So I really do feel that, you know, we change these metrics, we have the ability to change them again or to rethink how we use them. And I do think if we're going to rely on this data, we have to be honest about what it's telling us. And it is telling us the cases are rising. And it, you know, and again, I agree with Mrs. Case. I don't think any of us should be shocked. And I want to get back to, you know, what Mrs. C was talking about. But I don't think anybody should be shocked about the data either. I mean, literally across the country, we all heard there was a second wave coming and that it was going to be worse because now we're getting into winter, now we're getting into regular flu season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is not surprising. It just isn't. I would just like to see us be ahead of the curve of whatever's going to happen and not just keep talking about it. I do want to get back to what Mrs. Seep was bringing up, but if anybody else wants to jump in on the data, feel free.
I have another question for the zip code data, because you did mention that there are some very high zip codes where we don't physically have a school located, but I'm assuming we have students located. And so how do we balance for that? Just that's my concern with looking at zip codes. If we know that there's a really high one and they all go to this one school that's slightly below, that's my concern with looking at the zip code data. If they just don't happen to have the school located there, but they are having all the cases right there, just something to be aware of if we're looking to zip code data.
Well, I mean, one option would be to look at the zip codes of our enrolled students and our staff. I mean, we have that information, don't we?
Well, in terms of looking at the catchment areas for the schools, I think that is perhaps a little better. I know that the zip codes and our attendance boundaries obviously don't perfectly align. I mean, that's, I think, to be understood. It would definitely be mathematically a little challenging to figure out where kids are coming. Because again, remember that, about 30 to 40% of our students, again, depending upon the school, are actually coming from outside of the attendance area for the schools. That certainly adds a flavor to that makes it a little complicated to be able to calculate. I think another thought that just came to my mind in terms of zip codes where there are students, but there's not a school there. Again, when you think about some of our larger schools, like our middle schools and our high schools, that zip code could be part of the catchment area for that school, but the school may not sit in there, which I think raises another question. Do you look at the entire set of areas, zip codes where students are coming from for that school to be able to determine that, or how does that work? I think that's where it gets a little complicated, and we have to figure out what that looks like.
Well, it might, but I mean, unless I'm wrong, I've only got one zip code here that really falls into that, and that's that 85054. That zip code in its entirety is in our district and has no schools. But you can probably guess that most of those kids, because that's Desert Ridge, are going to Explorer, they're going to Pinnacle, they're going to Wildfire, they're going to Desert Trails and Fireside, possibly Greyhawk and Pinnacle Peak. And I'm sure there's others going, I'm sure we've got some going to Quail Run because they're an IB, and I'm sure we've got some, but I suspect we can say Desert Ridge, we probably can guess where most of those kids are if they're living in that zip code. Probably.
I have a comment.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to say. First off, the dashboard only tells us what students, right? Does the dashboard include employees?
Our district dashboard includes both
It includes both.
students
So
and
we
employees.
we've had no employees diagnosed in our schools.
That's not correct, no.
Okay. So how many of let's look at the dashboard. How many, we have 4 at Pinnacle? 5? How many of those are students and how many are employees? My understanding was that there were only students in there.
She said 2 employees.
I can pull it up and disaggregate those. Part of the reason that we included both together is we want to make sure that we're
Yeah, no. I understand the privacy. I get that. I don't want us to say
it
it's 2
includes
employees.
it includes both.
Right.
I mean, I'd be glad to provide the board with information in terms of how many cases. I mean,
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that the employees are included.
In fact, I think I shared this week's the data that was
Yes.
posted in an update today.
Yes. The other thing is we're not showing how many families we have quarantining, right? So we have 5 cases at Pinnacle, but how many? I just think that's another telltale fact that would be helpful for us to be looking at. So that's that. We can tell, Dr. Bales, I'm assuming, or Mrs. Felton, I'm not sure which one of you would know this, where the zip codes from where our students come from, where they live, and where they go to school. And we can do the same thing with our parents, or not our parents. I'm assuming, well, anyway, our staff. Yeah. All staff. Okay. I just want to clarify that we have that information. We can disaggregate that data. We can figure it out. Right. That's what Mrs. Greenberg was saying. I just wanted to reiterate.
I have a question. Are there students in elementary school that have been reported with COVID?
Yes, those there, as you note, there's some on their dashboard today.
Okay, some on today. Okay. Was this the first time they became on our dashboard? Or is it, I can't remember. 2 weeks, okay. But just, you would have been notified before if we had that. Have we had other students previous to the dashboard?
Hang on, I'll pull the dashboard up so we can refer
Okay.
to the information that's posted there.
I just think there are some schools who are, the parents truly are working hard. And I've read the letters, they're working hard. And I think we need to be careful that because there's been irresponsibility in this age group or whatever, that we don't make the same detrimental decisions to the whole group just because this other group hasn't been careful. Where if there's elementary parents who are really working hard at doing this to keep their kids in school, I think we have to be mindful of that. So I'm just, I think we need to look at each school individually and not just by zip code if we can.
Well, I think, we set the criteria, initially, then changed it. Looking at the data is aggregated from zip codes. The data is aggregated from zip codes. So if we as a district ever reach that 100 cases, it's because of what's happening. It's the community spread. I think the other issue here is we haven't even looked at the RT number. And I didn't look at it today, but what is it, like 1.6?
The 1.16, if I remember right?
I think, yeah.
For the state.
For the state, that's true. We don't have an RT for the district or for the, for Maricopa County. But the RT number is at 1.16 is showing. That means higher spread and faster spread. I think I know what you're saying, Nancy, but I think it's a little disingenuous to say that if we hit it, if the district hits 100, we're just shutting down. But it is the individual cases within these zip codes that would cause it. And I do think we have to look zip code by zip code. And we do have to acknowledge that it is community spread. Even if it's not happening at a school, the fact of the matter is that community is at higher risk because there's more spread. And the chances that if we, continue to provide a setting in which we would potentially contribute to that spread, I think is what we would be looking at if we were to say, oh, look, 85255 next week reaches 100. Ooh, do we keep Greyhawk open because they didn't have a case, but we closed Pinnacle Peak because they did?
I guess it goes back to the individual opinion. Is it's children spreading more than older young adults? I think we have differing opinions on that, basically. And so, and we have left talking about teachers and their immediate needs to take care of this. And so let's say, worst case scenario, we shut the district down because we get to that number. When we open up again, if we haven't taken care of the problem we have now, we have the problem all over again. So we can't leave this problem and not come up with solutions. So I know we went another direction, but we need teachers who need to be taken care of right now. So I don't want to leave that.
There's two issues here.
Totally two issues.
Yeah, two totally separate issues. You got to deal with the teacher issue.
Yes.
Two issues.
But there are two issues that have to really be looked at closely.
Yes.
They're interrelated.
Yes.
We've got to deal with the teacher issue, the dual modalities of teaching, and we have to decide what we're going to do about closure. And if we had only students in classrooms, and we had no adults teaching in them, then it would be easy to say we don't have to close schools, but that's not what it is. Our employees are, how many of those emails that we got said, I'm scared to go to work. I cry on my way to work. Some of those teachers are terrified. And we have to address some of these things. They have to know what the end is and when we go to the next option. So, and I know we can't make a decision right here. We can't vote on anything, but I think we need to give this
Mrs.
group
Seep some answer that she came to us tonight and asked, what are you going to do?
I think we have to give Dr. Wells direction. When are we going to get some information on this? How quickly can it happen? And how is it going to be disseminated?
I just want to make one point also that we are on our dashboard. I mean, we are showing elementary school students with COVID. So it's not like the elementary kids are not catching COVID. They are. I mean, we have it in our schools.
I have another comment here. With the teachers, you talked, Dr. Walsh, about a survey. When is that going out and how quickly? I don't want it to be, takes a week to prepare it and then another week to look at it. I don't want that. I want it quicker. And I don't know how to make that happen. I think the teachers need to be given permission now that start coming up with your ideas of how to make it work. And there'll have to be some parameters, but I want to give the teachers creative ability to, by site or by groups of sites, to come up with the ideas that are best for them. And I don't want them to think we're trying to make them endure to the end of the semester with something that doesn't work, or that if we do shut down and they come back, we're going to have the same non-workable system in place. I want this to go on, first of all, to give them hope, and second of all, to make something that was workable.
So in this case, if I can, or go ahead. I mean, you can. Again, I know we were talking about this all this week.
Yeah, well, we made a ton of progress on the survey today. I worked with Dr. Holmes on it. It was going to be PVA. We sort of reframed it. It's going to come out from the district, which I think is better, because the teachers have wondered why it hasn't come to everyone from district. So I think that's good. Dr. Holmes and I worked just to get things rolling, and we've included it with Dr. Bales and Dr. Corson for their input. I think the goal is to get it really sharp and out next week so that we already have meetings in place to start talking about potential solutions. And I'm hoping that as the data comes in, we can start really pinpointing solutions level by level, program by program, knowing that we have so many different special circumstances to deal with, right? We've got self-contained programs. We've got specialty CTE programs. There are a lot of contingencies, a lot of people that have to be involved. So we're rolling. We're ready. We're ready to get this survey out next week.
And
Dr. Bales agrees.
And
Dr.
the survey
Corson.
would go to every single teacher.
Every single member of the certified bargaining group, our psychs, our OTs, our PTs, our SLPs, all the people that are doing the work both ways, to try and have input on what they're going to need in order to keep doing their jobs and do it better and not have to do both at once.
When you say next week, is that like Monday or is that next Friday?
Well, it depends. We were thinking about next Friday, but I have a feeling after this evening, it might come out a little faster.
I think it needs to come out Monday.
The survey looks really good, and Dr. Corson's already looked at it. I'm sure Dr. Bales would be willing to hitch
We'll be
that
glad
giddy
to
up.
get it out as soon as we've got it right.
Yeah. We're talking the beginning of the week, but I think teachers need to be given the go, come up with your solutions. And is there a way to have those ideas? Where do they bring their ideas to? It
Well-
can't just be you. There has to be a multiple group of.
I would agree. I have been collecting those ideas as often as I whenever they come in, I add them to a shared document. I've already shared that document with Dr. Welsh and Dr. Bales. I've shown it to other people. I'm ready to trot it out whenever anybody asks. They're tired of me showing up because I've got
Okay.
the ideas.
Okay.
We're there. Just invite me.
So one thing we have to remember about next week is it's conference week.
It is
K-8.
elementary conference week next
So
week
there's no school Friday
for elementary, right?
and half
Yeah,
days
K8.
K8
K8, correct. I'm
8.
sorry.
and half days on Wednesday and Thursday.
Mhm.
And that adds a ton of work for employees. Conferences.
It does. Well,
are
especially
hard.
now they're trying to do them virtually and in person and spinning a fire plate and
Is there
all
some
that.
way we can give employees time to do this?
Time to take the survey.
Yeah.
Yeah, my goal was to
I mean
get it
literally,
out. Yeah.
literally here's a half an hour. We're going to start school a half an hour late. We're going to let kids out. We're going to,
Well, we're going
What
to
can
have a
we do?
rainy day schedule on Monday, so it's
what's a
getting
rainy
more
day
and more
schedule?
complicated every time.
Why
you
are
ask.
we having a rainy day schedule?
It's going to rain.
It's
Oh, come on, people.
Hope
Arizona.
springs
It's
eternal.
been, it's been in the
Megan.
forecast for more than a day. I think it may actually
Dream.
happen.
We're
Uh,
dreaming.
Oh,
Dreaming.
I do have a question for you. Are the teachers concerned about meeting the parents in face-to-face?
Good Lord, yes.
Then why are we making them do that?
We're not. We're not.
We're
At every-
virtual.
we're virtual where we can be. We do have some communities that have asked for in-person conferences. We've allowed teachers to make some choices. We've created awesome outdoor areas so
Okay.
that people feel safe. We conferences is sort of a place where we've let everybody's creativity and relationship with their community shine. And if we could do that with our schedules, the way that we've done it with conferences, it would be the best that PVUSD has to offer.
Okay.
It is really different at every site because every site has worked together with FAC, with administrators, with families and site councils to get something that works for that community. It's been remarkable.
So the teachers are feeling better about conferences because you've done this.
Yes.
Now we've got to take it into the classroom.
Now we need to try and let that creativity flow even further and let site principals, facts, and communities work together to try and get what works in that community.
Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge that surveys are work for employees. And I know they want the survey. I understand that. But that's another 15, 20 minutes out of their day, depending on how long the survey is and how much time they want to take with it. So I don't know if it's even possible, but it just seems to me that, I don't know.
Ms. Bacon,
Yes.
I'm
Dr.
confident.
Bales.
I am confident that our employees will take the time to give us the feedback. We just need to get it in their hands. And I'm committed to helping PVA, Dr. Welsh, and the rest of cabinet get that out. If I could offer just a couple suggestions, I think that we can make the commitment to get this survey out by Monday. I think that it might be, there are two issues that we need to address. And we certainly need to maybe consider a special meeting for us to come back and talk about metrics. So maybe Dr. Welsh and Mrs. Greenberg can facilitate that opportunity because we need to get that addressed as well. The second is if we get the survey out by Monday and we take 72 hours to get the feedback, we can certainly create an opportunity for a group of stakeholders, primarily teachers and administrators, to come together on Thursday or Friday of next week to digest the data. We're going to try to get it as much quantitative as we can to guide that conversation. And with help from our cabinet members, Dr. Corson with his facilitative leadership skills can help us pull this together. We can start brainstorming some options around parameters. Because as a district, we're going to have to consider not only communication issues, but we're going to have to consider transportation issues. And so the parameters might help guide us and set us on track so by the end of the week, if we can narrow those parameters, then our teachers with parameters and the site leadership team can work on implementing those with their own timelines. Because I think if we let this be considered and solved at the lowest level possible, we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck and people buy in to the shared decision-making model that we're committed to. And this is something that we can have as a win-win, I think.
I agree. And there's one other thing I want to clarify. I think that we need to make sure that our teachers understand that these surveys are just that. They're surveys. They're not tools to use in HR processes. We need to make sure that employees are safe. They feel protected when they're making these things. I think our principals are also doing an amazing job. They're doing everything they can to help the teachers on their sites. So I want them to know that they're acknowledged as well. This is not about anything that they're doing or not doing. It is about an impossible situation, and we need to find a solution.
So I
So
think it's important to also remind our employees that we're not voting for a particular solution. We're collecting some data that will guide that conversation to help us establish some parameters. And then moving forward, come up with some solutions that stakeholders have been involved in to help make those recommendations to cabinet and to board for decisions.
I have a question about the survey itself. Is it going to be done with the system we put in, or is it so that the data can be collected automatically?
We're collecting this as a Google form, so it will immediately, that's why we're trying to make it as quantitatively driven as possible. So
But is there still a place for comments?
I'm sure we can build
And
that.
how does that all work?
again, we can certainly add that opportunity for qualitative piece. It makes it much more difficult to look at qualitative data and organize it in such a way that makes it useful in a timely manner. So quantitative is the best way to get the data. Dr. Welsh is much more of an expert with this data stuff than I am, but I think the point is we want to make it useful immediately. And to add a qualitative piece makes it much more difficult. We have lots of qualitative data already that we've collected. You have hundreds of emails. We have collected those as well. Susie has them. We know the general consensus on the qualitative piece. Let's get to some of the quantitative pieces that help narrow this conversation and help establish some parameters.
May I suggest that on the survey that you say, so quantitative, but then at the bottom of the survey say, if you have comments, send them here and we want to hear from you. I mean, so they know that
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say, I like your timeline of Monday, and you're already getting into the data on Thursday and Friday, and you're then getting out to the schools and working at the lowest level where it's closest to where they can be solving the problem. So I really appreciate that. And I do want to make sure I ensure that we have parameters in place where we are ensuring that there's some equity where every site is willing to be flexible. Because if some sites are not as interested in being flexible, that's going to cause issues as well. So I want to make sure that our parameters do call for flexibility with everyone, and that's as they're moving forward, that we do have that expectation.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I was going to say almost the exact same thing. I appreciate that we have this plan. I appreciate that everybody's willing to get it started sooner as opposed to later. And you and I will work to see when we can have a special meeting. I think it would be helpful to at least have some of this preliminary data, if we can, but we'll get something
Data
out.
from the survey, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To know, but I would like to, put my voice 100% to that notion of flexibility. We keep talking about equity, but the reality is if we are applying the same solution everywhere, that's equality, that's not equity. And this is a district that prides itself on equity, which is putting the resources, whether they are the same or not, so that we ensure success for every individual, whether that's a student or that's a teacher or other staff member. And so, I do think we have to be aware that, the way different communities work, it means different solutions. And they are all, we need to treat them all as valid. This is going to be brainstorming session in some ways of, amazing proportions. And, what I'm hoping is we start hearing some things over here that maybe these folks didn't think about. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that could really work for us as well. And that we start seeing some, just incredible ideas burbling up that can be adapted on a site by site basis or a level by level or a, curriculum area by curriculum area, et cetera. So I'm excited. I hate to say it, but I wish we had done this sooner, but I appreciate that we are at least here now. So
I have a comment. So that the teachers over at one school are coming up with ideas. They don't know that this school has already come up with a solution and they're trying to figure it out. Is there a way? You said you shared it with Dr. Welsh, and so how are these teachers knowing all the ideas out there? That's what I want to know.
We already have, I've created a shared drive for each site where they've been uploading their plans, and it's already been immensely helpful. Just the reopening plans on like how Campobello is doing drop off, or how Larkspur is handling their lunch recess, and how they're managing the ESP shortage or whatever, right? Like the teachers have been able to go into those site plans and take a look at what other sites are doing, bring them to their facts. It's been a really useful conversation piece. And every time I get an amazing idea from a site, I get fact minutes, I get a supervision plan, I just load it right in there and then let everyone else know that, Quail Run has a really neat idea for specials. You guys should check it out. It's been really useful and created a pretty robust conversation around the district.
So currently the teachers can look at other schools already and
If
what
it's-
their ideas.
If it's been sent to me, I've uploaded it. A lot of them have uploaded a lot of their own stuff.
And it doesn't matter whether they're teacher association members or not. It's all
No.
going out to all of them.
Yeah.
And you have contacts for all of them. I mean,
I
they have
do.
a way to get into all of them.
I only reach out to people that are association reps, but those association reps have made those available to everyone on their sites, their principals. It's
Okay.
shared with everyone in PV Learners. Anyone can come to that shared drive anytime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for making that resource.
Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss? Dr. Street, sorry, do you have any last thoughts or comments?
Sure. No, I think we have a good plan moving forward here in terms of addressing both. I think of the big things that we need to tackle here. I'll work with the team early tomorrow, so we can get that going in terms of the survey piece. And again, really, I think that's the piece. And I think Susie and we've talked about this too. Is really giving our site-based folks, I almost think of it like a menu of options, and that flexibility in terms of being able to think of what kinds of things that can work, and empowering them to be able to find those solutions. So aggregating that information out and then being able to share that with folks so that they're able to do that. And then certainly we can work in terms of one, obviously getting another conversation, not necessarily a conversation, but a meeting with some potential action scheduled, so that we can talk about how to tackle that. I think we'll have to wrangle our heads around that, because obviously just looking at a zip code, and where the schools are, but I think we can work on something that would be able to be a rule that we could apply that would allow us to take that into account. So we're looking at a school by school basis.
So any last comments? I'm looking everywhere. Anybody else? Melissa, you have anything for us? If not, It's 9:20. I think we are wrapped up. May I have a motion to adjourn, Mrs. Case?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.